Hey again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Experience Maker. My name is Dan Gingiss. I'm your host for today. I'm a customer experience speaker and coach, and every week I bring you a fascinating guest who is creating experience, who is the experience maker at their organization or helping others to do the same. And I have a fantastic guest today that I am excited for you to meet. Her name is Diane Burley, and she works at a company called Coveo. And Coveo is focused on relevance in customer experience. And I think it's such an awesome word. We're going to talk about a really interesting study that they just did. Diane, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm great. How about yourself, Dan?
I am doing awesome. Will you tell our audience a little bit more about you and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm a former journalist, and then I was a digital media executive. So I helped companies like Gannett and other New Jersey newspapers handle that early digital transformation. I even owned my own Pure Play, a high-end design outlet in the early 2000s. Some of the challenges that we had during that digital transformation is having this amazing corpus of information, but how would you serve up the right information to the right people? So I actually joined technology companies to help them, tell their story on how they could help solve these problems. And what I discovered is that a lot of B2B tech companies don't know how to tell stories. So I sort of recast myself as a storyteller for B2B as we delve and try and solve these different issues.
So important for B2B, where oftentimes branding and your typical marketing get underused in favor of sales. And
Exactly.
I've worked in marketing-centric organizations that are B2C, and I've worked in sales-centric organizations that are often B2B. And sometimes in that case, marketing is looked at nothing more than a support staff for the salespeople. And it's missing a big opportunity, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. It's a huge opportunity. And I love to, and so often product marketing, comes up with a name, and I don't want product marketing or engineering or whoever the stakeholders are within any given organization, they have to come up with their favorite name. And, it's like, I say to them, you're trying to sell cheesecake and you're calling it a wombat. People are not going to know that they're going to get some creamy, wonderful cheesecake if you're calling it wombat. So we have to work on these types of things and use the lexicon of people. And again, it's what people expect, right? They want you speaking their language, and then you can, use cookie crumbs and bring them in and start to speak your own.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. So tell me a little bit about Coveo, and what does the company do before we get into the really cool study that was just released today that I'm super excited to talk to you about?
Yeah, I had to put my news hat back on. Coveo is really a terrific company. They cut their teeth in search, creating very robust search back around, I think, 2008, and then recognized it was all on-prem. And then they were one of the first companies to go to the cloud. A fully cloud native offering, I think 2013, 2014, it was fully done at that point. There was an evolution, and companies that try and go on the cloud today, they know that becomes one of those, it's fine to have that aspiration. It's another thing to actually make it work. And it was a multi-tenant cloud offering. Added in the AI and machine learning, because in search, one of the things that happens is you or I go to a site, we go to the search button. Typically, that's where all of us start our journey, right? And we put something in. Well, if we don't use the exact word, right? We didn't call it a wombat when we were looking for a cheesecake. We're not going to find what we're looking for. So machine learning and AI, they help with, automatically creating and curating the thesaurus and dictionaries and things like that help people find what they're looking for easily.
So let's get into this topic of relevance. Now, we've talked about this before. You and I had a great webinar a few weeks ago where we were talking about relevance. I love the word, and I love its connection to customer experience. So tell me, how do you guys think about brands being relevant?
Well, and we have to take a step back. I always have to take a step back before I answer your questions, Dan.
No problem.
So we call it sort of the Moore's law of expectation. Everybody is on the web, and all of us for the last year we've been home, and we're moms, we're shoppers, we're homeschoolers, we're workers, employees, whatever. We're wearing 15 different hats. We want to get a task done when we're online, which is the only way we've been anywhere, right? We've been online. And what we're finding is that the digital stalwarts out there, the Amazons and the Netflixes, they've honed AI and search to the point where they anticipate your wants and needs. You're not looking for what to watch tonight. It's right there in front of you. It's boom, you're going to do it. Everything else is lagged behind. And we have this expectation now because they've set the bar so high that we want that expectation, whether we are homeschooling our kids or looking for a pair of shoes or whatever it is, we want to have that same very relevant experience. We don't want to see things that are not relevant to us. We want the information we're looking for when something doesn't work. I'm trying to figure out how to get my 90-year-old dad a COVID vaccine in upstate New York. And it's like, I got to sift through all this information to find what's truly pertinent to me. So that's really what our idea with relevance is: just show people what they need and want, and hide everything else until they're ready for it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think the Netflix example is perfect, is that at some point it got to the point where Netflix knows better what I'm going to like than I do and make great recommendations. And it's right there when I need it. And I think that is becoming the expectation for sure. One more question about this. I'm just trying to kind of bring this into how do we think about this from a perspective of, I always live at the intersection of marketing and customer experience. So when you talk about relevance, I kind of think partly segmenting and targeting in the marketing world is finding the right people, right product, right place. And then partly more of like personalization from the customer experience world of, okay, making sure that we know that Diane is currently homeschooling and, all those things that you just said. Am I looking at that right in terms of relevance throughout the journey?
Yes, and typically, we wrote an article recently that says personas are dead, because from a marketing standpoint, we've always geared ourselves to creating these personas, and then you have to do all these gymnastics to sort of figure out what is the journey that individual will want. Well, the reality is nobody wants one journey. There's a million journeys that we're all on, right? How we find anything is dependent upon what are you currently doing? What's your bandwidth limitations? What's your time frame limitations? How did you get there is probably very different, even though we have the same destination. I did an exercise once with a group of people, all professionals and developers, saying, how did you walk here to this venue today? And they all told me different stories of how they'd gotten there. And it's like, right, we all have our own journey. So the idea that we're smart enough as marketers to hand curate that orchestration is just insane. I mean, it's just truly insane.
Well, it's such a great point, because it harkens back to the olden days of marketing. I mean, I got my start in direct mail outside of the digital space, and you had to segment because you could only, you had to send the same letter and the same brochure to, 50,000 people. And so you had to, you could break it up only so many ways.
Right.
Now that we're all digital, that idea of a persona really does make less sense, because you're not going to find 50,000 people that act and behave the same way. You may not even find 2 people that act and behave in the same way. And so the idea is figuring out, how does Diane act? How does Dan act? And what do they need differently? Because they may not need exactly the same thing or respond to the same thing.
Well, and let's say I'm Diane, the coupon clipper, right? And so the site learns me and says, just show her things that are on sale, because she's never going to buy that high-end thing. But what if I had a situation where my kid's going on an overnight and the backpack broke, and I need to buy something immediately, and it's the time of year when they're not really selling a lot of backpacks? I'm probably going to be a very different persona shopper at that moment. I'll probably buy some top of the line thing that I might not have bought when I've got plenty of time in July or August, and I'm back to school and I'm thinking about it and all that sort of stuff, versus that last moment. So people's contextual situations change. And so what they might have done at one moment is not going to work in another.
Yeah, totally right. All right. Now we don't usually break news here on the show, but today we get to do this because we have a brand new report out of Coveo that just got launched today. So you guys are going to be among the first in the world to hear about it. And Coveo looked at relevance with U.S. consumers, surveying almost 2,000 U.S. consumers to examine customer frustrations and challenges across three kinds of digital experiences: e-commerce, customer service, and support, and employee experience. I don't know that we're going to get to all three of them, but I definitely want to start with e-commerce because I think it's such an interesting place. I'm going to read you a stat that came out of the study, and then I would love to hear your thoughts about it. 90% of consumers expect online shopping experiences to be equal to or better than in-store, but half say that they sometimes to always experience a problem when shopping online. So what that says to me is we got very high expectations, but we're not meeting them. What did you get from that?
Yeah, exactly that. And they itemized what the problems were, and it led to website search, website navigation, finding it confusing on how information was organized, or not finding the information that they were looking for at all. So that often that's a hint to me. And I know a lot of merchandisers. In my role, I speak to people that are merchandisers, and here they go to school, they get their degree, and they find themselves having to write the copy for all the different products that are out there. And so much copy, so many products won't necessarily have descriptive copy. So, if I'm looking for, I don't know, a pair of hiking boots that are great in snow, and those words aren't in there, I might not find it. And so that really frustrates customers.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I mean, you're giving something up in order to get convenience, right? So the online shopping, one of the reasons we do it is it's convenient and usually fast, but we give up some of the physical aspects of being in a store, the ability to ask somebody for help, the ability to touch and feel things, try things on, all that sort of thing definitely changes. And so it's interesting because I've gone through this exercise before with some clients is, you could say, well, maybe that just means the consumer expectations are simply too high. But the problem is consumer expectations have only been going in one direction for the last 5 years, and it's always up. And part of that is because, as you mentioned before, there are companies that are meeting and exceeding those expectations. So once we see that it's possible, we expect it from everyone.
Well, and you think about it. I mean, we do everything now. We go on vacation, and it's Airbnb, or we're looking to date somebody, and you're online. We do everything online, and we used to call them category killers, right? The people at the top of the food chain of that category, they're doing phenomenal work with AI. Now, part of the reason why machine learning works is because you have to have these massive amounts of data in order to train and get the results you want. One of the things that Coveo that's really interesting, and I found interesting joining them, is that we have an entire R&D team. It's almost 200 people. And they are looking at these problems that the companies are facing of not having all that data. If you're like we were talking about shopping sites, so unless you are a site like an Amazon where people are going back and forth, or a grocery store, or drugstore, something where you're going all the time, it's going to be difficult to get enough data to train the set to really fully understand the intention of the customer. But what we've been doing is finding that you can work with sparse data, and they've built an entire model of looking at it, modeling in space, they call it, which is some really interesting concepts. And one of the ways that they do that is that they look and see what you're doing in that moment. So let's say I go out and I'm buying a pair of size 7 black shoes, and then I'm looking at something else. Well, just like and you mentioned it before, going into the store and having that assistant say, oh, you have those black shoes, maybe you'd like this to match. We start to recommend based on what you've just done. That's unusual because a lot of times search engines don't necessarily track that immediate information. They're grabbing historic information and batching it and looking at it later versus doing it real time. So it's just these little things we find that make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The same study in the e-commerce said that 43% of consumers would pay more if they could find what they were looking for in just a few clicks. And not surprisingly, millennials lead that, with basically half of millennials saying that. I think that's so true. I've talked a lot about that. Even in the credit card space, where I spent a lot of time, we were always trying to figure out, how do we take something that is 4 clicks and make it 3? And how do we take 3 clicks and make it 2? And at one point, we actually took something down to 0 clicks, because we made it show up on the homepage right when you logged in. And the amazing thing when we did that is we found that people logged in and logged right out, because they got exactly what they needed. They just were logging in to get their transactions. There they were. Happy day. They don't have to spend any more time on their credit card site than they needed to. And not surprisingly, that led to much higher satisfaction scores. So I definitely think, and I always advise to people, look at how long it takes to accomplish a task on your mobile app or on your website, and try to figure out ways to reduce the steps, because usually not all those steps are necessary. I want to jump to customer service, because I love that topic as well. And not surprisingly, you guys found that not only are there high expectations, but kind of a low tolerance for bad service. 73% of consumers will abandon a brand after 3 or fewer negative customer service experiences. 3 or fewer, that's not that many. I've read other stats where even a single one, there's a big part of the population that will leave a brand. So what should companies do to prevent that from happening?
Well, again, if for customer service, a lot of this is either going to be agents having to find the information and give it to you, or like myself, looking for the COVID information from my dad online. You've got to be able to find, people need to be able to find what they're looking for immediately. I didn't want to have to read through 3 pages of things. Oh, by the way, I also had to fill out, was I eligible, every single time, before I could get to the link that would take me to whether or not there were actually any vaccines available. So, I mean, talk about, I had to read a treatise before I then had to go through a whole series of links. That's just going to aggravate people. And what we also found, and I didn't have this in the release that we gave you, but the cross tabulations show that, not surprisingly, digital natives, millennials, people that skewed younger, and it was a perfect slope. The tolerance level dropped right off. And imagine too, these people have a million other things going on in their lives right now, right? We talked about whether you're homeschooling kids or trying to work from home, and the dog's barking like mine is in the other room. You've got all these distractions, and so you want to be able to get to what you need, get in, get out, and move on to the next task. So maybe there's more tolerance for people that are older and don't have all these distractions. But I don't think that that's a great business move for most people to be thinking in terms of killing off your younger audience.
Well, it's so true. And a lot of it is they don't know any better, right? They've grown up. That's why we call them digital natives. They've grown up having only digital as an answer. And so, you and I at least have some painful experiences waiting on hold at a toll-free number. I'm not sure that youngsters even know what a toll-free number is. I mean, true story, when I was switching over my cable and internet and home phone, I was talking to one of my kids and I said, I'm going to get rid of the home phone because we don't use it. And the next question shocked me. She said, "What's a home phone?" I mean, she doesn't have any reason to know. We don't have any phones up on the walls I don't have a telephone in the house other than our cell phones. But amazing, right? That concept of a home phone is completely foreign to a teenager. And so I do think that, you may, depending on who your audience is. Look, I also worked in health insurance where our audience were only seniors, and that's a completely different story, right? And people would ask me, well, what social media channels should I be on? Well, if you're marketing to seniors, don't worry about being on Snapchat, right? They're not there. But you need to be on Facebook because we know grandma and grandpa are on Facebook most of the time. So knowing your audience and understanding what their expectations are crucial. But certainly these tech companies and a lot of companies out there are focused on that younger market, and you definitely have to be relevant to them, as we've been saying. Just a couple other stats that were interesting. 44% of consumers will rarely or never complain to a company about a negative customer experience. So businesses may never even find out about it. Now, this is a concept, I'm glad that you guys brought this up, because this is a concept that I discuss in my upcoming book. And heck, I'm going to take a moment and show what that looks like. The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share, coming out in September and available for pre-order now. But what I talk about is what I call the leaky bucket. And the leaky bucket, which most companies have, is the group of customers that are walking out the back door while you are entirely focused on the front door. So you're focused on marketing and sales and bringing in new customers. And meanwhile, you have people that are leaving you and you don't know that they're leaving. You don't even know why. The ones that leave and complain are doing you a favor because they're at least telling you what you did wrong and you might be able to fix it for the next guy. It's those silent ones that leave, which according to your study, at least 44% are never going to say anything. They're just going to pick up and leave to your competitor. And that alone, I think, answers the question of why should we be focused on customer experience? Because when you're focused on your existing customers, you're going to have that relationship with them, and they are going to talk to you when something goes wrong because they're going to want to give you the benefit of the doubt.
So I think you're going to be a star in one of a feature article of ours, where we'll talk about the leaky bucket and how this all ties together. I love it.
Well, the leaky bucket is, it's a great concept because it really, I mean, I won't name them, but I was working with a B2B at one point where literally in order to net $1 million of new sales, they had to sell $1.4 million. And that was just to make up for what was getting lost on the back end. And of course, logic would say, well, why don't you focus on not losing them on the back end? And then you can not put as much pressure on your sales team, not, have every year the sales goals go up until they're just in such a stratosphere that, the salespeople they know they're not going to hit the numbers because they're impossible numbers. But yet keeping existing customers, the reason why that's so important is not just the revenue that they bring you, but also when they're satisfied and happy, they become your best marketing. They tell other people about you and they actually help that sales team bring in new customers. So critical. And I love that your data bore all that out.
We actually have a stat on that too, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but we actually have a stat that talks about how they will be effusive about the brand when they're having a wonderful time. So that fits right in with what you're saying.
And B2B companies think that can't happen to them, but it absolutely can. Yeah. I mean, how often, when I was in corporate America for 20 years, the number of times that colleagues at other companies asked me, well, what platforms are you using? Or what do you use to solve this problem or this problem? And I'm going to answer them and I'm going to say, yeah, I use platform ABC. And then the very next question is going to be, well, do you like it? And, right? And so, and trust me, I've answered yes and no to that question. So where can people find this study if they would like to download it, Diane?
Well, you can go to coveo.com and we'll be all over. It's going to be all over LinkedIn very shortly, and a lot of different news outlets will be sharing it as well. I think you're going to be joining me next week with Sheila Moran, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about it. And I should have a link for you guys easily to find.
Here. Well, we're going to be doing a LinkedIn Live next week, which I'm super excited about, on the 9th. That's 11 a.m. My local time is Central. So if you're on the East Coast, that would be 12. If you're on the West Coast, that'd be 9. If you're over in Europe, grab a tea and join us in the afternoon. But super excited to talk about, we're going to be reviewing a lot more details of this study and going through a lot more statistics. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to comb through all of the details. And Diane, you mentioned it, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to make sure we get this on the screen. That is Coveo's website so that you can go and find the report yourself. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you mentioned employees. Well, we didn't get to talk about employees, but but maybe that's something you and I will discuss next week. We're coming up to a year at home, and I think that there's amazing statistics that come out of here. We looked at the productivity angle, but there's also a huge proficiency angle, which I think, the C-level tends to be more, they don't really care if you have to work an extra hour or two to find the information you're looking for. But what might stop them in their tracks is the fact that people don't feel confident about the information that they're giving people. So when you're calling up for customer service and you've got a workplace, an employee who might be reticent about answering the question. They're not sure if what they're giving is the right information. And we know, because when we call the 800 number, that they often don't give us the right information, because when we call back 3 more times, we get 3 different answers. So there's a lot of issues around that as well. So I just want to throw the workplace in there.
Yeah, it's a great point, and especially, the customers know that, right? And they feel it. They know they're not getting the right answer. Having spent 10 years in the credit card industry, I've had to correct more than my share of credit card call center agents, because I know what they're telling me isn't true. And it's not that they're lying, it's that they aren't educated enough. They don't have the right training. They don't know the answers. And I think we often say in customer experience that, a happy employee equals, excuse me, a happy customer. It's so important that if we're asking our employees to provide a great customer experience, that they also feel they're getting a good employee experience. Because if they're happy with the company, if they feel like they're well treated, then they're going to want to share the love with customers. But if you mistreat your employees and you overwork them and underpay them and don't train them, that's going to shine through to customers. And sometimes that one employee is the only employee they'll ever engage with at your company. And that is not worth hanging the entire relationship in the balance, I would certainly say.
Exactly.
All right, Diane, it has been a real pleasure. I'm going to put this up one more time. Please join me and Diane, and also one of your colleagues as well, Sheila. We're going to talk about the problem of relevance in customer experience, sponsored by Coveo. This is next week on LinkedIn Live. Go to the Coveo site. I've also been posting it on my page. And join us, please. Would love to see you. Also, next week, we are going to have Kim Newton as our guest. She is a 9+ year veteran of Hallmark and left a couple of years ago to start the Intentional Pause Project. Really, really interesting. She's a fascinating lady. Can't wait to talk with her. I should say, when she was at Hallmark, she was in charge of customer experience. So very relevant, I would say. Diane, awesome to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with me. And I'll see you next week for our LinkedIn Live.
All right. Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of the Experience Maker Show. If you have a suggestion for me on who I might have as a guest on the show, please let me know. I am actually booked all the way through May. I have amazing guests lined up, but I'm always looking for new people. So if someone at your company, if you as a viewer, or just somebody that you think would be a great guest on the show, let me know. You can hit me up at dangingiss.com or on Twitter at dgingiss. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am not hard to find. Just go ahead and search my name. You'll find me in lots of places. Looking forward to connecting with you. Thanks again for joining. Have a great rest of your week and a terrific week.